Welcome to 6.5, amplitude and period. Let's go ahead and get started. Find the amplitude and period and sketch the graph. So each of these, we'll just draw a quick graph here. And so our amplitude is 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 above and 4 below, 1, 2, 3, 4. And we cut 2 pi over 1, which is 2 pi, that's your period. So we're going to cut them into fourths. So pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2, and 2 pi. So it starts at 0. At the top, it's at pi over 2, goes through at pi. At 3 pi over 2, you're at the bottom, and then back up. So here is a typical graph from 0 to 2 pi with an amplitude of 4. And then they switched it up, and they put 4 in the period position. So our amplitude is still 1 and negative 1, okay? Amplitude would be 1. Our period is 2 pi over b. b is 4. So our period goes from 2 pi to pi over 2. So technically speaking, we would take this graph and squish it into this distance here. All right. So I'm going to do it just on this one, but for future purposes, I'll stretch it out so it's easy to see. So I'm just going to do it from 0 to pi over 2 to match these two together to see what they look like. So again, you have to divide this into 4 pieces because I want to see what you get, and that's going to be the top times the reciprocal of the bottom, which is pi over 8. So each of these little marks here is pi over 8 units long. So the first one's at pi over 8. The second one would be 2 pi over 8, or pi over 4. Then 3 pi over 8, and then 4 pi over 8 is the pi over 2. So we start at 0. We're at 1 at the top at pi over 8. At pi over 4, we're back at the x-axis. At 3 pi over 8, we're at negative 1. And then back down. So this is what the 4 does in different positions. The 4 as amplitude stretches it up. The 4 as part of our period shrinks it. So let's move on. All right, C, 1/4 sine of x. So again, let's just go ahead and draw this out. So that's our amplitude of 1/4. So let's just say this is 1. So 1/4 is right here, and negative 1/4 is there. All right, so I'm just stretching everything out so we can fit everything on the graph so we can see it easily. But it's still 2 pi over 1, or 2 pi for the period. So make those 4 marks. That's 2 pi, and pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. And we're still at sine, starts at 0. Our peak goes to the x-axis, the valley, and there. So here's what your sine looks like. And then if we put the 1/4 in the b position, 2 pi over 1/4 over b is 2 pi times the reciprocal, or 8 pi. So this stretches it horizontally all the way out to 8 pi. So again, I'm just going to make 4 marks. It's not proportional to the other one over here. So I'm just making these marks. Still starts at 0. We haven't shifted left or right yet. And our amplitude is still 1 and negative 1. So again, divide 8 pi by 4, you get 2 pi. So the first one is 2 pi, and each increment is 2 pi units. So this would be 4 pi, 6 pi, 8 pi. And make your marks, and then draw your sine function. Obviously, this would be stretched way out if we were comparing it incrementally, proportionally with that one. Okay, E. Now we have an amplitude and something for B. So let's go ahead and mark this down. Amplitude is 2, and B is 1/4, which we know from the last question. 1/4 is 2 pi times 4, or 8 pi. So I'm going to make my fourths again. That's 8 pi. And this is 2 pi, 4 pi, 6 pi. And now we just draw everything. And it should be faster and faster each time we do this. Our amplitude is 1/2. So again, I'm going to stretch this out. So if I say this is 1, then 1/2 is right there. Okay? Negative 1, so negative 1/2 is there. Again, B is 4, so 2 pi over 4 is pi over 2. So we are shrinking this. It's usually 2 pi units long. We've shrank this by 4. We've divided it into by 1/4 here. Okay, so Again, I'm going to make my 4 units here. We'll call this pi over 2. So now we got to divide this by 4 to get what each of these increments are. So you're taking pi over 2 times the reciprocal of 4. Each of these is pi over 8. So this is 2 pi over 8, which is pi over 4. 3 pi over 8. 4 pi over 8 is pi over 2. And now you just make your marks again. And you just draw it like that. G. Negative, this is going to be this is outside your function, so the negative flips it vertically. Okay, so instead of your graph looking like this, it's going to do that instead. Okay, so our amplitude is 4 again. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, negative 4. Okay, and we make it into 4 parts. Our b is 1, so it's still 2 pi over 1 or 2 pi. So you mark everything else down. There's your typical values. And then put your marks in. Instead of our normal marks, we're going to do this. It's flipped vertically. Okay. H, that flips it horizontally. So what does that mean? What's it look like? Okay, so watch what happens. If we put, first of all, b is 2. So 2 pi over negative 4 is negative pi over 2. So our distance really isn't negative. Our period is still pi over 2. It's the same as one of the last ones we just did. And we got to cut that into 4 units. So each unit is going to be, pi over 2 times 1/4 or pi over 8. So it flipped it horizontally. So the period is still pi over 2. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going left. And these are all by pi over 8. So pi over 2, which is really 4 pi over 8. If we subtract the next increment of pi over 8, that's 3 pi over 8. And these are negative, by the way. Subtract another pi over 8. So 3 pi over 8, or I guess we're adding pi over 8 to the negatives. So 3 pi over 8 plus a pi over 8 is negative 2 pi over 8, or negative pi over 4. And then you have negative pi over 8 there. And it's still the sine function. And our amplitude is 1. So this is what the sine function looks like as it was reflected over the y-axis. Number 3. Okay, cosine. All right, so let's go ahead and do the cosine here. Let's see here. We're going to draw our normal thing here. Amplitude is 3. So it goes 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3 down here, negative. And again, our period is 2 pi over 1. So 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 2 pi. Pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. So cosine starts there, goes through here. At pi, it's the valley. 3 pi, it goes back through. And at 2 pi, it's back up to the top. So that's your cosine. And now b, cosine of 3x, what happens when you have the 3? So these are a lot like what we just got done doing. Okay. Oh, that's not amplitude. I'm sorry. Still goes through at 1 and negative 1. B is 3, so you have 2 pi over 3. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 2 pi over 3. So this is all squished down very far. 2 pi over 3, and then we divide that by 4, which means you take 2 pi over 3 times 1/4, and that's going to be pi over 6. So each one of these increments right here is pi over 6. All right, so that's going to be pi over 6. 2 pi over 6 is pi over 3, and that's going to be pi over 2. So 1 pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, and 3 pi over 6. And then you get 4 pi over 6, which is 2 pi over 3. And again, here's cosine. Starts there, goes through pi over 6, and the bottom is at pi over 3, and then back up. Oops. Did that wrong. There you go. Okay, so let's do the next one here. Oops. And so now we have 1/3 is our amplitude. So we're just going to say this is 1. So these are going by thirds. Here's 1/3 right there. And we'll say that's negative 1/3. Okay. And again, 2 pi over 1 is 2 pi. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, that's 2 pi. These are our normal values, pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. And then we put our marks in. Starts there, goes through at pi over 2, the bottom is at pi, back through at 3 pi over 2, and up to 2 pi. And D, our amplitude is 1 and negative 1. And B is 1/3, so 2 pi over 1/3, which is 2 pi, times 3 over 1, or 6 pi. Okay, so we go over to 6 pi, and we divide it by 4, and that's how much each of the increments are. So that's going to be 3 pi over 2 when we reduce. So this is 3 pi over 2, and another 3 pi over 2 is 6 pi over 2, and another 3 pi over 2 is 9 pi over 2, and another 3 pi over 2 is 12 pi over 2, or 6 pi. So now we mark them. So we can use different colors here. Probably make it look better. There you go. All right, let's go on to the next one. Okay, so now we have our amplitude is 2. So 1, 2, then negative 2. And our period is 2 pi over 1/3, which is 2 pi times 3, or 6 pi. So just like the last one, 1, 2, 3, 4, 6 pi. And each one is, if we divide that by 4, is 3 pi over 2. 3 pi over 2, and 6 pi over 2 is 3 pi, and 9 pi over 2. Okay, so now we mark them. Cosine starts here, goes through 3 pi over 2, the bottom is at 3 pi, back through at 9 pi over 2, and up to 6 pi. There you go. Now F, amplitude is 1/2. So if we say this is 1, then 1/2 is there, negative 1/2. Okay, and B is 3, so 2 pi over 3, so that we're shrinking here. Our distance, 1, 2, 3, 4, is 2 pi over 3. And we divide that by 4, or we multiply by 1/4. That gives us pi over 6. So it's pi over 6, 2 pi over 6, 3 pi over 6. Now mark it. It goes through at 1/2, pi over 6, the bottoms, pi over 3, pi over 2 goes back through, and 2 pi over 3 back up. Okay? All right, let's do the last set. Okay, so now our amplitude is negative 3. So it's still 3, 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. But instead of going like this for the cosine, the negative flips it upside down. So it's going to go like this. So remember that. And B is 1, so it goes to 2 pi. 1, 2, 3, 4, 2 pi. So our typical pi over 2, pi, 3 pi over 2. Those are the axis around the unit circle values. All right, so now we mark it. So remember it's upside down. And it has a pretty big magnitude, or amplitude, sorry. And that's what that one's going to look like. We put the negative inside, and all of a sudden it flips it the other direction. So 2 pi over 3 is your period. Divide that by 4, which is multiplying by 1/4. That's pi over 6 again. So we're going to the left. So 1, 2, 3, 4, negative 2 pi over 3, negative pi over 6, negative 2 pi over 6, negative 3 pi over 6, and our amplitude is still 1 here. So we're going to do, we start here, and it goes through pi over 6, pi over 3, pi over 2, and 2 pi. So that's your cosine graph with a negative horizontal reflection. Okay, now find the amplitude, the period, and the phase shift. All right, so as long as this is 1, then we are going to the right by pi over 2. That's how much the phase shift is. That's what that means. Okay, so everything else is still the same. Amplitude is 1, and B is 1. So we still go to pi, but we're not starting at 0. We're starting at pi over 2. So that's our starting point, and then count 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now how do we figure out all those? Divide your period by 4. So each of these go by pi over 2. So pi over 2 plus pi over 2 is pi. Plus another pi over 2 is 3 pi over 2. Plus another pi over 2 is 2 pi, which is 4 pi over 2. Plus another pi over 2 is 5 pi over 2. That's the end point. And now we just graph sine. So sine starts at pi over 2, up through at the bottom and back there. So shifted to the right by pi over 2. On number 6, we shift to the left. Remember, this has to be a 1. Shift to the left by pi over 4. So instead of starting at 0, we're starting at pi over 4. So before we make that mark, let's remember our amplitude is 1. And let's, our period is 2 pi. We're going to divide it by 2, or by 4, which makes each increment by pi over 2. All right, so it's going to start at negative pi over 4. So if we put that mark at negative pi over 4, the next increment is pi over 2 later. So negative pi over 4 plus pi over 2. So get a common denominator. So negative 1 plus 2 pi is 1 pi, positive 1 pi over 4. So positive pi over 4 is over here. So this distance here is still pi over 2. All right. So pi over 4 again, now it's positive, plus the pi over 2. Common denominator would be 2 pi over 4. So that'd be 3 pi over 4 is the next, the next mark. Now, but you're going by pi over 2. So remember, this is pi over 2 units. So right here is the next set. So this increment is the same as this increment. So this is 3 pi over 4 here. And the next one will be here. So let me erase this little mark here. Okay? All right. So now, 3 pi over 4 plus another 2 pi over 4. Remember, we're going by pi over 2, so 2 pi over 4 gives us 5 pi over 4. So this is 5 pi over 4. So what do we have here? We have 1, 2, 3. We need one more. One more right there. So you have to have 5 marks. That includes your beginning starting point. So that's 5 pi over 4 plus another pi over 4. Or excuse me, 2 pi over 4. Because it's still pi over 2, the increment. So that gives us 7 pi over 4. All right, so now we have our marks. Sine starts at 0. The next point is not the y-axis. The next point is going to be pi over 2 units away. So at pi over 4, we're up here. 3 pi over 4, we're going through the x-axis. 5 pi over 4, we're down at negative 1. And then 7 pi over 4, we're back up. So this is what this looks like. So it stretched it out. It appears to stretch it out. But remember, your distance is 2 pi. How do I know that from here to here it's 2 pi? Well, if I take 7 pi over 4 minus a negative pi over 4 plus, that gives me 8 pi over 4, which is 2 pi in length. So this is 2 pi. Okay, now let's go on. Let's do number 7. All right, so again, this is a 1 here. So we are going to move to the left by pi over 6. So we're starting at pi over 6. So before I make the mark, let's just hold off for a second. Our amplitude is 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And 2 pi is still our length. So 2 pi over b. All right, so still 2 pi. We divide it by 4 into fourths. So that's going to be pi over 2. Okay, so it's going to be tough. So let's just make our mark at negative pi over 6. So we're at negative pi over 6, and we're going to add pi over 2. So what are we really adding? We need to multiply by 3. So we're really adding 3 pi over 6. So negative pi over 6 plus a positive 3 pi over 6 gives me 2 pi over 6. Okay, so watch. If this is pi over 6, then that increment's pi over 6, and this increment's pi over 6. And we're supposed to be going to what? 2 pi over 6, which would be right here. This is 1 pi over 6, this is 2 pi over 6, which reduces to pi over 3. So then you have 2 pi over 6, and you add another 3 pi over 6. That's what we're adding to each one. That gives you 5 pi over 6, which is going to be 1, 2, 3 of these increments away. So 1, 2, 3. That's going to be 5 pi over 6. So you take 5 pi over 6 plus another 3 pi over 6. That gives you 8 pi over 6, which reduces to 4/3 pi over 6, or 4 pi over 3. So 1, 2, 3 is the next one. 4 pi over 3. Okay, and we need one more. So 1, 2, 3 increments. The next one's there. So 8 pi over 6 plus another 3 pi over 6 gives me 11 pi over 6. So this distance from negative pi over 6 all the way to 11 pi over 6, this is still 2 pi. That's our period still. Okay, so now we draw the sign. Where are we starting? At negative pi over 6. At pi over 3, we're at the top. Pi over 6, we're back to the x-axis. And 4 pi over 3, we're down at negative 3. And 11 pi over 6, we end. So this is what we do. And that's number 7. So let me get rid of that. So pause it and look at it if you need it. I'm going to move it out of the way and do number 8. So number 8, we are moving to the right by pi over 2. And our amplitude is 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, negative. So we're going to start at positive pi over 2. So this increment is pi over 2. That's what I'm claiming at the moment, okay? So b is still 1, so our period is 2 pi from beginning to end. So we divide that into fourths, so we're going to be adding pi over 2 to everything, which is good. That makes each of these increments pi over 2. So if we're starting at positive pi over 2, we add another pi over 2. That gives me pi, or 2 pi over 2. Another pi over 2 gives me 3 pi over 2. Another pi over 2 gives me 2 pi. And we need one more. So 2 pi would be 4 pi over 2. I'm just doing common denominators in my head while I'm doing this, okay? So this is 5 pi over 2 where it's going to end. So let's mark it. Starting at 0, at pi, starting at pi over 2, at pi we're at the top, 3 pi over 2 we're at the x-axis, at 2 pi we're down at the valley, and 5 pi over 2 we are at the end. And that's number 8. Okay, number 9, find the amplitude, period, and phase shift, and sketch it again. Same type of stuff, we're doing cosine now. So we're going to move to the left, pi over 3. Amplitude is 1. The period is still 2 pi over 1, so 2 pi. So we're starting at negative pi over 3. So at negative pi over 3, we got to take the 2 pi and divide it by 4, which is pi over 2. We're going to add by pi over 2 to each one. So we need a common denominator, which is 6 multiplied by 2, multiplied by 3. So negative 2 plus positive 3 would be positive 1 pi over 6. So pi over 6 is half of pi over 3, 30 and 60. So if we're going to move to pi over 6, and this increment is pi over 3, this increment is pi over 3, pi over 6 is right there. So we're moving one whole of these cubes here, okay? 1 and a half. So this is what pi over 2 looks like. So you got to make these look right. So again, a half plus a whole puts the next one here. The whole plus another half puts it right there. A half plus the whole puts the other one there. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's where they all are. So you need to make good, accurate graphs. This is just adding and subtracting fractions. Get good at it. Okay, so that was pi over 6, and we're adding pi over 2 each one, which is pi over 2 is 3 pi over 6. So pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6 is 4 pi over 6, or 2 pi over 3 if you reduce it. So 4 pi over 6 plus another 3 pi over 6 is 7 pi over 6. And 7 pi over 6 plus another 3 pi over 6 is 10 pi over 6, which reduces to 5 pi over 2. So this is cosine. We start at 1. Our amplitude is 1 and negative 1. So we're starting here. At pi over 6, we're at negative 1. At 2 pi over 3, we're back at, I'm sorry, that was all backwards. At pi over 6, we're at the x-axis. At 2 pi over 3, we're at the bottom. At 7 pi over 6, we're back to the x-axis. And 5 pi over 2, we're at the top again. So it looks like this. There's your cosine function shifted to the left by pi over 3. All right, number 10, we're shifting to the right by pi over 3. So again, we'll just say this is pi over 3 here. And b is 1, and our amplitude is 1. So 2 pi is our typical period. We're going to divide by 4. So again, we're adding pi over 2. So that's where we get the pi over 2, dividing those into 4. So pi over 3 plus pi over 2, we get a common denominator of 6. So this is 3 pi over 6. This is going to be 2 pi over 6. So the 2 plus 3 is 5 pi over 6. All right, so again, in this setup, if this is pi over 3, we need another half for pi over to be adding the pi over 2. Because this is 60, and half of that's 30. That makes 90 degrees. Okay, so we need to start at pi over 3, go a full cube plus half to get to the next one. That is going to be the 5 pi over 6. And we go a half cube, and then a full cube, and a half a cube, and a half a cube, and a full cube. That's where the end is. So now we take 5 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6. This is 8 pi over 6, or 4 pi over 3. So 8 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6 is 11 pi over 6. And 11 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6 is 14 pi over 6, or 7 pi over 3. Cosine is right here. Oop, why do I always do that? Starts at pi over 3. It's the x-axis at 5 pi over 6. It's at the bottom at 4 pi over 3. X-axis 11 pi over 6. And back up to 1 at 7 pi over 3. So there's your cosine shifted to the right by pi over 3. All right, here we go. Amplitude's 4. We're shifting to the right by pi over 4 because b is already 1. So we'll just say this is pi over 4. And our amplitude's 4, so we'll just make it really tall. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, negative. Okay, so if b is 1, our amplitude's still 2 pi, or our period's still 2 pi, divided by 4, we're adding pi over 2 to each one. If this is pi over 4, then that's 45 degrees. Pi over 2 is 90 degrees, so we need 2 blocks for pi over 2. So 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. There's the end. So pi over 4 plus pi over 2. I should put this down at the bottom here. Pi over 4 plus pi over 2. Common denominator, so multiplied by 2. So 1 pi plus 2 pi is 3 pi over 4. So pi over 2 is the same thing as 2 pi over 4. So we're adding 2 pi over 4 to each one, that's 5 pi over 4. Plus another 2 pi over 4, 7 pi over 4. Plus another 2 pi over 4 is 9 pi over 4. Let's draw it. It's cosine. At pi over 4, we're at the top at 4. X-axis at 3 pi over 4, 5 pi over 4 at the bottom. 7 pi over 4, we're at the x-axis. 9 pi over 4, we're at the top. There's your cosine. Number 12. Shifting to the left by pi over 6, we'll call this negative pi over 6. Amplitude is 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. So we're starting at negative 11 pi over 6, and b is 1, so it's still 2 pi. So we divide it by 4, and we're still adding pi over 2. So we need it to be a 6, so we're going to be adding 3 pi over 6 to everything. So negative 1 plus 3 is 2 pi over 6. So this is 1 pi over 6. We're adding, we need to get to 2 pi over 6 or pi over 2, okay? So what I'm saying is this is 30 degrees. Pi over 6 is 30 degrees. And this down here, 1 plus 3 is 2 pi over 6, which is the same as pi over 3, which is 60 degrees. So if each cube is 30, I got to get to a positive pi over 3. A positive 60. So there's 30, there's 60. So each increment is going to be 90 degrees long. So 30, 30, 30. Think of it like that. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And of course, we need to go further. So we're going to move this over. And 1, 2, 3. There's the end. Okay, so what is that? That was pi over 3, or 2 pi over 6. So 2 pi over 6 plus another 3 pi over 6 gives me 5 pi over 6. Plus another 3 pi over 6 gives me 8 pi over 6. 8 pi over 6 plus 3 pi over 6 gives me 11 pi over 6. Okay, so now we graph it. Cosine starts at the top, goes through the x-axis next, at the bottom, x-axis, and back to the top. There's your cosine. Number 13.